Live for NFL week number 10 here on a Wednesday morning, as always, on the RAS Picks YouTube channel at 9:15 a.m. Pacific time. In this video, we'll go through each NFL week 10 game on the schedule. We'll talk about the sides. We'll talk about the totals. We'll talk about any props that come up as well. If you're watching this video after it has aired on the live stream, be sure to leave your comment down below with any questions you have about week 10. Really enjoyed answering all of those as the week goes on. We're doing about 40 to 60 questions a week as we get close to 6,000 viewers on these videos each week as well. There's also going to be timestamps in the description. So if you're coming to this on Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or ready to roll on Sunday morning, you can go game by game by selecting the times down below in the description. Jump forward to what you need to know to get ready to bet on week number 10. Good to see more than 100 people here in the stream to get things going. That number always ticks up. It's good to see. We have a very important question to kick off the show from Ian McRae. He asks, what week is it appropriate to start feeling worried that the NFL season is going by too fast? How about now? NFL week 10 coming up in front of us. It's moving quickly. It was just August a couple weeks ago, and here we are into the middle of November. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by again on this live stream. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I want to encourage some extra comments within the live chat, but also want to encourage extra comments on the video down below after it airs. So what I'm going to do, hopefully Ed doesn't get too mad at me for this one. Obviously, Right Angle Sports, we run a service that is a paid subscription. But I'm going to be giving away 3 different options to people in the live chat right now, and then I'll pick 3 people from the comments down below. We'll go best comment on the live show. Here we'll take the top 3, and then we'll go best comments down below on the video. And what you will get is your choice. We'll give you the choice between whether or not you take the college basketball starter service, which is in full go at the moment. So you can take 6 plays, if you like, from the college basketball starter service. We will comp those for free. Or you can take the next 3 releases from the NFL service. Each one is available. Of course, Red Angle Sports specializes in college basketball, and they have been doing this for more than 20 years with a winning history. They're widely respected by everybody in the industry. And we take it from me, the work and prep that goes into these college basketball plays is second to none. And so I would love if everybody watching the show is able to check out the starter service. But to give everybody a little bit of a boost, we'll go the top 3 comments from the live stream and top 3 from the video. Once we get to the weekend, down below in the comments, we'll comp you 6 plays. But I encourage everybody to get over to raspicks.com/order and subscribe to the starter service. But we'll give everybody a boost here, and we will pick 3. So we'll keep that going as we get through it. Before we get to the highs and lows for the week, I just want to catch up on the comments already. Lots of good mornings. Ryan Roberts, ready to roll. I like it. Devin Barth, back for another show. Good morning to you, Devin. We are seeing a lot of familiar faces as well. Grayson, he's backing up. Will Levis is legit. We'll get to that game with the Titans now that he is named the starter as well. We have some more anger that the NFL season is quickly coming. Mike Stacks asks, did you end up cashing quarter 2? This was a tough one. It was good to see that the winner of the quarterly for $150,000 went to a Simple Handicap Slack alumni who was back in the channel back in 2019 when that was going. Good to see that Mike was able to win that and get the $150,000. We ended up missing. We had 2 issues. One, we elected not to take the Browns free square, essentially, and we went with the Falcons, which was a killer. And then, of course, we had the Jets with everybody else on Monday night. So we ended up 20-5 for the quarterly. 20-5 or 19-6. But it was a 3-2 final week. So we just missed on that one. College basketball, unpredictable. That's what makes the edge so significant. When you have 14 guys like Right Angle Sports do, working behind the scenes, covering every region, covering every team, it's all broken down. That's where the edge comes from, and doing that prep. And what makes it unpredictable the most makes it incredibly predictable for the team at Right Angle Sports. Brent says, pump CBB picks into my veins. Well, you can absolutely have them over on RAS Picks. Lots of other good questions. Matt says, good morning. Larry says, good morning as well. KH with good morning. Hunter, good morning too. Here we go. Let's get to it. We'll do the high and low for all of these teams as we do each and every week here on the show. To start, this is your chance to jump in. Tell me who is too high, who is too low. We'll go back to the market ratings from Unpredictable this week. 1 to 32. These are based off of closing lines of past games so far this season, also weighted for opponent. And we see a ranking in the left column. It is the teams ranked from best to worst, 1 to 32. And then you see in the GPF column, that is the point spread rating against an average team. So San Francisco, number 1 in the market ratings, 6.5 points better than an average team. And then on the flip side, we have the New York Giants and Tommy DeVito all the way at the bottom, minus 8.7 versus an average team within the NFL. I hate to push this a little bit, but as you guys let me know who you think is rated too high, who you think is rated too low. Stop the cursor right here on 22nd. I see the Denver Broncos at 22. They were 19 last week. Schedule is viewed to be a little bit weaker based on who they have played and how some of these numbers closed in other games. We're seeing them 2.5 points worse than an average team in the NFL. But here's the thing that stands out to me. Their defense is rated 24th based on these ratings. This is a defense that was historically bad. You look at DVOA, you look at other stats, they were like through 5 weeks, historically bad. All of a sudden starting to sort of figure things out just a little bit too. And so I wonder if that is going to sort of drop off when we see this 24 number turn into maybe like a 13 or 14. And that brings this overall number of 22 up towards league average. So that certainly stands out to me just a little bit on the low side. From the high side, everything's kind of falling into place when we look at the top 10. Not a lot within the top 10. You guys let me know. Does anything stand out there that seems too high for you all the way around? We'll talk about the Panthers in just a second, but let me know, guys, who do you see as too high? Who do you see is too low? We'll start it off with the Bolts are too high, referencing the LA Chargers, currently sitting in the markets at 12. This probably matches the preseason expectation, but when we start to look at this offense rated 10th, it's actually a pretty good call here from Insight. That is an offense that, although they played the Jets defense, which is very strong and performing exceptionally well, when we look at them down here, they're the second-rated defense in the NFL. The Chargers, without Mike Williams, without Josh Palmer, there's just a lot there on offense. So I think that's a pretty good call that LA Chargers here at 12 could be a little bit too high, 1.2 points better than an average team within the league. So that's a good call there on the Chargers. Pittsburgh too high. Pittsburgh currently within the ratings, right at 15. That's another decent call. I wonder how low they can go, though. Like, is this a team that you can see around the Washington, New England level at 25, 26? Interesting look for sure. Connor says Rams, Packers, Saints too high. And again, so like the Packers are 20th. Like, how low are they going to drop off? Same thing with the Saints. They're 14th. Do we really see the Saints as like an 18 to 20 team? It's tough. We're not going to see massive movement within these, so that's an interesting look for sure. And then the Rams down at 24th. A couple shows ago, we were definitely all over the Rams, so hopefully everyone has benefited from that pretty well. Let's see more comments here. Another call for the Chargers, too high. Garrett Stone on too high for Pittsburgh. Seems like there's some good consensus within that. That Steelers game this week, very interesting for sure. Bucks feel too low. San Francisco too high from Rich. Interesting comment. Another fun game to talk about. Cleveland 11th. What are we doing here? It's only their defense that is winning games. No one has mentioned their offense being above average or even neutral at best. When we look at the Cleveland Browns, 25th for their offensive rating. Number 1, absolutely the truth for that defensive rating. And no question about it, that defense absolutely carrying them through a lot of games. The Deuce of Hearts brings up an important point. Almost 200 watchers, 210 at the moment. Only 50 thumbs up. Come on, people. Are your thumbs broken? See what's going on there. This guy's working his butt off trying to help us. All we have to do is give him a thumbs up. Thanks very much for that comment. If you do have a second, hit that thumbs up. Certainly helps us out a lot. Saints too high. Dallas too high for Melissa. Garrett says, going to say it. KC too low. At number 3. They could very well be the best team in football. A lot more comments. Connor, Devin, Justin, Minnesota too low. Philly, Buffalo too low. Interesting with 2 top teams in the league being too low. Also seeing the Giants. Tony, you got the first laugh of the show. There you go. New York Giants too high. They are 32nd. And with Tommy DeVito, you might absolutely be onto something with that. All right. Fun to look at. Keep an eye on those Denver Broncos. Might be a little bit feisty against the spread the next couple of weeks. Here we go. let's get to it as we get to the games and the breakdowns. One more time, a reminder before we get rolling. We'll do the top 3 comments from the live chat, top 3 comments after the video in the comments down below, raspicks.com/order. That will be for the starter service. We'll give you 6 plays to the college basketball service to check it out. So as we keep going through these games, please keep the comments going on the right side. Michael says, what do you feel the value of home field is now? During COVID, it seemed to be 0, but recently it seems to be closer to 2 points. Running average is about 1.5 per team. Couple situations where it definitely skews a little bit higher. Carpenter's Cards, before we get rolling on Thursday Night Football. How early is too early to bet these primetime unders? Should I grab the number early in the week or wait before kickoff for some possible late money on the over to push the number up? Well, here we go. We get started tomorrow with the Carolina Panthers on the road at the Chicago Bears. The Bears now out to a 4-point favorite. Total in this game, 39. Opener in this game was 41. So what I would say to Carpenter's Cards, which I'm assuming is a sports card shop, interesting in its own right, would be we're seeing these adjusted down as is. And so really, to me, the question is not so much running in blindly to back it because these games continue to go under the total, but we're seeing the market react to it. So it's not necessarily something that is hidden, and you kind of have to ask yourself when the right spot perhaps to go the other way may be. I'm not really running into blindly back some of these unders. I know this week it can be awfully tempting when you look at some of these games. However, we're seeing 39 bet down from 41 tomorrow night. We're seeing 36 bet down half a point on Sunday Night Football. And then Monday Night Football, we have the inverse with the Broncos and the Bills holding steady in the high 40s. And so it's not something that I would blindly look at backing. Let's talk about this game tomorrow, though, because there is some interesting things happening. So on Tuesday, yesterday, around 12 p.m., we saw Chicago money come into the market. 3.5s turned into 4s, and there was speculation that that was based on Justin Fields news. If you're betting this game, obviously Justin Fields' status is going to have a big impact in how you're looking at this. There was a comment this morning that he was throwing at practice wearing a glove, and the judgment that they were making was how the ball was coming out of his hand. He got back to practice last week on Friday, and he was throwing the ball around, and then it's obviously on a short week, but it's not so much he can't come back from injury on the short week. It's him coming back last week, using that as extra practice to prepare for this week. As it stands right now, I would say 80% Fields in, 20% Fields out, and it would be a Bajent game. And the market is kind of reflecting that. From the Carolina Panthers side, we have Burns in the middle of the field. He is not going to go, dealing with a concussion. We also have 2 potential injuries within the secondary. There were comments in the chat about when are we going to get off this Carolina Panthers offense. It sadly has to be this week. I watched them against the Colts guys, and I'm like, okay, when's it going to happen? When's Thomas Brown going to make it work? When are we going to see Bryce Young start making throws? When are we going to start seeing guys get open? Last week was the week to do it. That Colts team had given up nearly 40 points the last 3 weeks. People are running wide open. Monster games for receivers, props, overs against the Colts defense all season long. And then on top of that, you lose Zaire Franklin, the league's leading tackler from the middle of that defense. And the Colts are still adjusting to Grover Stewart not being in the middle of the defensive line. Carolina did nothing. And so to see that happen was really deflating on what I thought the Panthers could potentially do, again, to get their offense into that 19 to 21 range with the play caller switch. It just doesn't look like it happened. And I'm watching that game. It was 3 quarters of essentially those long, laboring, comeback, attempted backdoor drives for Carolina. It was just slow, non-explosive, methodical, incredibly frustrating to watch. And where this gets a little bit tricky is the Bears defense is quietly getting a whole lot better. Remember, they played for a month without 3 of their top 4 starting defenders in the secondary. If it was probably like a week 5 stream, I don't remember the exact week. They're all kind of blending together. I was on this stream talking with each of you, and there was an article we pulled up, and it said the injuries in the Bears secondary are DEFCON levels bad. That's all been resolved for the last couple of weeks. And we look since Gordon, Jackson, Johnson all get back within that secondary. The Bears are 8th in defensive EPA per play. And this is a Bears team that's played a ton of overs going back to the middle of last year. They've had a ton of defensive turnover. They have that defensive-minded head coach. He's now got his guys healthy, and they're starting to figure things out. And Sweat looked a lot better being inserted into this defensive front seven. He now has another week and faces a Panthers offensive line that's just been horrendous. And so I like the Bears in this spot. I like the upside from that, especially if field plays. But then it comes a question of price, and Matthew Roseburn nails it. Are the Bears really laying more than a field goal against anybody? And if we were to go back to those market ratings, you see the Bears 4.2 points better than an average team, and we see the Panthers 4.2 worse. Panthers 6 point worse. Not a lot separating these teams. And so we get a pretty big difference all the way around. Morgan says no Burns is a problem. It absolutely is. It's just tough. Like I'd like to back the Bears, but I'm just not dying to run in there and lay 4 points with Justin Fields and anybody. From a prop perspective, something that could be very interesting. I'm becoming a big in-play props guy. I'm really enjoying it. Have had a little bit of a different mindset change within that. The Panthers in that game against the Colts, as they were laboring from behind, trying to come back, had Miles Sanders involved way more than he has been in the last 3 weeks. And there has been a feud between Sanders and Reich and how he's being used. That's been an all-season thing. Some of the in-play prices, I was looking at one sportsbook against the Colts. It was early third quarter. They had Sanders half a yard higher on his receiving yards and his rushing yards than his current in-game total. So he's just clicking over and over and over and over because he's getting the bulk of the carries when the Panthers are playing from behind. That's when they move Hubbard off. And so as you're watching this game on Thursday night, if you see the Panthers playing from behind, pull up your sportsbook app, check the in-play props, see how they're handling Sanders and Hubbard. You may very well find that we see those two flipped again in play because their usage just isn't being rated properly. And that's something that you may be able to take advantage of in what is probably otherwise going to be a very boring game the other way around. Insight says, with the Bears D playing better, what do you think about Carolina team total under 17.5 minus 135 look? No opinion on that one. Unfortunately, I've always, last couple of weeks, have been on the other side unsuccessfully. I think we're kind of seeing things level out with Carolina all the way around. Devin Barth says last week's Bears cover was all time. They had 26 plays run against them in the final 18 minutes of the game. From 3 minutes left in the third quarter till the final whistle, the Saints ran every single offensive play inside the Bears territory and scored just 7 points. So yes, it was an all-time cover. The Bears got away with it. Absolutely. Let's keep her going. Let's get on to game number 2. Keep the questions coming in. Pardon me, I missed Kyle Estrada. With or without, I'm assuming Fields in, it would be Chicago or pass for me. Defense looks improved. Offense loses the turnover battle by a lot and hung in there on the road. Kyle, we should sub you in to do some of these game breaks down. That is a great synopsis all the way around to what we're looking at. Let's get to Sunday morning. Colts, Patriots, Germany game, 6:30 a.m. Pacific. Probably not as many people waking up to watch this one as they did Dolphins, Chiefs last Sunday in this same time slot. We are looking Colts 1 point favorites for the most part, 1.5 at Chris. Total in this game, 43.5, up from the opener of 42.5. What I would say about this one that's kind of the big factor all the way around is the damning thing for me with the Pats offense was they faced a Commanders defense that had allowed teams all season to walk up and down the field. And the Pats had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 chances down 20-17 to move the ball into field goal range and just had no chance against that Commanders defense. And they now face a Colts defense that, as we talked about with the Panthers just now, like this is a Colts defense that's allowed anybody to do anything all season long against them. And it's a very similar category in terms of defensive class that the Pats just faced against Washington. If New England wasn't doing a whole lot against Washington, I don't know what changes this week as they still have all of these issues at wide receiver with the injuries. And so what's starting to sort of surface on Twitter is there's seems to be legitimate rumors that Belichick's job is in serious doubt. And that's really kind of becoming more of a talking point over the last 12 to 18 hours. It was always kind of in the background. If you went deep into Patriots forums, it was like, can it happen? When would it happen? Now these rumor accounts are starting to leak out that it's a very real possibility. And there's a big emphasis on this game. If this was a game where you could kind of see things falling apart, you would expect most likely that you get a bit of a better showing all the way around from New England. But I'm looking at this team week after week, and there's just nothing from an offensive success perspective. We'll have to watch Zaire Franklin and that injury. If he is out, the Patriots probably have a path here to be able to run the football with both of their running backs, because there's a big hole in the middle of the defensive line. There's a big hole in the middle of that linebacker group. The Panthers could absolutely not exploit that. The Patriots are going to have a better opportunity of doing so, and that could take some burden off of the passing game. On the other side, I think quietly what's maybe going a little bit unnoticed is last week, Gardner Minshew and the Colts offense looked absolutely atrocious. They're catching maybe a bit of a break as J.C. Jackson for the Pats is not traveling with the team. That is probably going to make Michael Pittman, who continues to get a ton of targets, look very valuable within this spot. He's probably going to be very popular from a prop perspective. I've tried to get involved with him a couple times from the prop side. Haven't been overly successful with that. It's a tough one to sort of time. We're also seeing the Colts really flip their backfield between Taylor and Moss, as Taylor's getting a lot more usage in the last little bit. So those would be two interesting props that I would consider maybe looking at if you're trying to find something within this game. But I do think the side where it stands right now, with just how bad Gardner Minshew and this Colts offense is beginning to look, even with Steichen calling the plays, just not a lot that I can get excited from the side. I think from a total perspective, you might see some late interest in the over within this. It's so tough to get there. But I did hear on Monday and Tuesday, there were rumblings around that as well. Chosen says that Parker is probably back. I mean, like what is his value overall? Like, is he really going to change everything up for this Pats offense? Like, he's the best option that they have. But boy, I will say it's certainly a lot easier for Mac, who's really struggled under pressure. He's not going to deal with the team in the Colts that blitz. He's not going to deal with the team in the Colts that get a lot of pressure. So that may kind of allow him to be more comfortable in the pocket. Boy, but that's tough all the way around. A couple other comments here. Mac Jones getting benched is more probable than Bill Belichick firing. These accounts seem to think otherwise. I don't think it's a loss and he's out right away, but that's becoming a pretty real thing all the way around. Connor says Parker's worth negative points. He's not worth a whole lot. So Mike says it's amazing I'm talking you do and no liquids to wet your whistle. We're all drinking coffee here on the show, Mike. I just always forget to drink it as I end up talking. Once I get going downhill with football, not a whole lot stopping me. Let's keep it going. Browns on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens laying 6. Total in this game, 38. I like Baltimore, but I really like Baltimore money line. We'll tell you with who in a unusual money line parlay, but we'll give you the second leg of that as we keep going through the games. This is an interesting spot because the Browns offense against the Cardinals with Watson back was really, really, really misleading. Ian Harlitz had a thread yesterday about Watson and his throws 15 yards downfield. It's an area that Arizona has been able to be exploited all season long. I think overall what we're seeing with the Browns is an inability to consistently run the football, and they really got made better last week looking than they actually were because of some of those deep shots that connected against a very bad defense. I am really amazed at the Ravens and how they're being talked about as a team. The Ravens have some really good reporters. And let's take a team like the Miami Dolphins, for instance, who were kind of like for the first 5 weeks, the upstart in the league. Everybody thought they were number one. That was the team that everybody wanted to talk about. And when you saw what they were saying about the Dolphins, it was Tua, it was Tyreek, it was this explosive offense. Everything was sort of predicated on like one or two guys. And it was the main focal points that everybody is watching. What I'm seeing from the Ravens being reported is everything but the main story, which is Lamar Jackson, who we know is now, I think he's favorite to win MVP. He's playing at an extremely high level. That's kind of like secondary or tertiary to what the actual other stories are. The biggest story is Mike Macdonald in this defense, how he's able to scheme pressure on week to week. Harbaugh's praising him for how he adjusts to his opponent week to week at an exceptionally high level. You have film guys saying that he is the best play caller, offense or defense in the NFL. And I don't know how many people fully realize that. And it's kind of like this minorly hidden talking point within the national media. Then you're getting a lot of praise for the offensive line. Last night before bed, I watched a 3-minute video on John Simpson on the offensive line, another name that probably not a lot of people have heard about. And you're getting these sort of like the O-line's getting praised, the D-line's getting praised. They're being talked about how they don't have a key standout guy, but it's this collective team effort. You have the running game coming around. And again, it's like, here's Lamar on the other side who can do anything any other quarterback in the NFL can do. This is a deadly good Ravens team. And they closed 1.5-point favorites on the road against Cleveland with DTR in week 4 off the top of my head. That was a long time ago. This is just such a different spot. We're now seeing a Browns team without both of their starting tackles going forward. We're seeing a Browns team that really can't sort out the running game. Deshaun Watson is disappointing in every single way. We're seeing the Ravens now healthy on both sides of the football, the defense improving, the run game being found, the Monken play calling integrated. You have to see how this team is trending. And one more other thing I'd say, Aaron Schatz, DVOA from FTN. I hope I said that last part right now that it's no longer Football Outsiders. He has Baltimore historically great on defense, comparing them to the 2000 Ravens defense. And he's like, if I took away 20% of the Ravens DVOA, they would still win the Super Bowl 11% of the time. And so he's not even saying that it's necessarily overrated, because even if you take away any sort of inflation from it, they're still listed as the best team in the NFL within those metrics. And so that really stands out to me quite a bit. I don't love this overall insight. I'm not a big team totals guy, so I don't have a snap opinion. That would be the way that I'd force to lean. But I think the Ravens money line, we'll get to a second leg in a second, and I think Ravens are the side in this one too. I really think this is a terrific Ravens team all the way around. Here's Moonfish. 13 different Ravens have 1 or more sacks. They're just rotating guys in. It's so good to watch all the way around. Let's keep her going. Texans on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals 6.5-point favorites, expensive 6.5-point favorites, or 7 even money. We're seeing 7 even money at Circa, seeing 7 even money at Buckeye, 6.5 most other spots. Total in this game now out to 48. Cincinnati Bengals Sunday Night Football took pro money on the side, took pro money on the over. That over opened 46.5, closed 51 in some key places. Gets off to a roaring start, falls just under the total. Never really had a chance in the second half. There were turnovers in the red zone. There were drives that were stalled out. There was a bizarre 4-minute sequence where the Bengals went from a second and short inside the red zone to punting at the end of the first half. A lot of quirky things kept that game from going over. We are seeing now for a second week in a row, the over is extremely sharp. This number has been bet up quite a bit from 45.5 to 48. And these moves were originating with all the key places. We saw that Chris go first. We saw Circa go first. Very real money on the over. I know pros myself that are on the over as well. I would tend to agree with it. We're now at kind of the peak. But here's kind of the underlying factor. First and foremost, you have the Bengals offense, which is night and day from what we saw in the first half of the season. That's kind of like 1A as the story. The big story within this is the Houston Texans and their play calling. So Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, for the first 7 weeks of the season, so 8 weeks, pardon me, was 31st in pass rate over expectation. Last week, CJ Stroud goes to the podium, and he's like, he didn't say verbatim, but expressed, I don't like this. I want to be throwing more. I want to be more aggressive downfield. He then was followed up, Bobby Slowick was, with, what did you think about CJ Stroud's comments? I'm in step with him. I agree with it. We then saw D'Amico Ryan say, I agree with it. We still want to get the ground game going, but I'm with it. What did we see against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Houston's throwing it all over the field. Early down pass rate success through the roof. Pass rate over expectation through the roof. That was the full unleashed, unlocked version of the Houston Texans. Now, here's the thing that stands out with that. Not only is there an assumed change happening with the Texans, who have an offensive line that's great at pass blocking, but can't run block to save their lives. We have seen this style of offense for Houston be forced out of them when they're playing from behind in games. And it's really sort of ramped up the tempo, ramped up the aggression, ramped up the pass rate. We've had Houston for a couple of weeks in kind of tightly lined games, tougher opponent, kind of like condensed. This is now Texans on the road catching a touchdown. So not only do you have this play calling change, but you're now very likely to see the Texans playing from behind, where if you think the play calls are going to change, you're going to get that kind of forced out of them from an offensive game plan. And they're throwing against the Bengals secondary, whose biggest weakness is at both of the safety positions. So you can kind of see how this matchup is conducive to getting a lot of points going on. And you also have a Houston Texans defense dealing with some injuries too. Chase dealing with the back injury. Great comment here from Insight. What was reported yesterday makes me think he is going to miss this game. I don't think it's confirmed. If I had to be put on the spot for it, I'd say 55 miss, 45 play. It was very kind of damning in how it was reported. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. Possible look-ahead spot for the Bengals playing the Ravens next week. I don't know if the Bengals are looking ahead to anything with where they're sort of sitting within the standings overall. I tend to agree with this a little bit. He's not going to put up 470 a game. You're right. But I do think with that bumped up pass rate, if that holds, we're going to see CJ Stroud look really good in a lot of games the rest of the season. Dylan K, if you can get 3-team 6-point teasers at plus 180, you have great value with those for sure. You want 160 or better on those 3-teamers. Let's keep it rolling. 49ers on the road at the Jags. San Francisco -3 total in this game, 45.5. I think we'll see the total continue to go up, and I like the Niners on the side laying the field goal. I think this is a spot where San Francisco gets right in a lot of ways. We have seen them struggle the last couple of weeks. They now go into the bye, but the big thing with them is they have just elite top-level, top-line starting talent. You take a couple pieces away, it's a big drop-off. And when you take away key pieces like Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, it's an even bigger drop-off. So both of those guys trending to come back and play in this game, that's going to change this offense around. We'll see a lot better version of them. Off 3 consecutive losses, even though the Niners are priced at the top in a lot of market ratings and a lot of power ratings, we are seeing that number for the Niners adjusted down nearly a field goal from what they were just a couple of weeks ago. I think all of that plays into this price being fairly appealing overall. And so I think we see a better effort. The big thing that maybe not a lot of people are talking about, Kyle Shanahan getting much more involved with the defense. Steve Wilks under a lot of heat. He's been blitzing more than the players want. We had the bad press conference from Bosa following the loss against Minnesota. They've been forced to do some different things within the secondary. That all likely changes. There's a push between, does Wilks get forced into playing the wide 9, or can he do what he wants? He's very different from what we've seen Robert Salah, what we've seen from D'Amico Ryans. There's also a push internally to get him down on the sideline. Wilks calls plays from the booth upstairs, and the Niners have always had this defensive coordinator on the sideline with this like aggressive presence, bringing energy. But Shanahan basically said, okay, this is enough. We got to start changing this. They add Chase Young. And to me, that addition of Young, not only is that going to work out as you add a very good pass rusher to that front, but I think what it's going to do is give them a little bit more depth where they can actually start to get pressure with their front 4. And it won't kind of have these corners stuck in no man's land as they've been bringing extra guys at a higher rate than they have in seasons past. And so I think that looks really good this week on defense, and they clean things up. From the Jags side of things, this is a top 10 rated team. They've rattled off 5 straight wins in a row, but I have some questions here. They're beating the Steelers. They're beating the Colts. They're beating the Bills in London on that second week. They're beating the Falcons. Their other win, week 1, against the Colts, too. This is a big step up in terms of facing an opposing defense, which the Jags have only ever done in this caliber against the Chiefs. And that was a game where the Jags offense looked really poor. And so I think Jacksonville as a whole kind of stepping up here in a big way. Maybe too tough a task, especially if the Niners sort that defense out and we see a little bit of an impact immediately from Young as well. So even though Nat H says, I think the 49ers are still rated too high, I think this is a big bounce back spot for them and they look a lot better. We'll get a game from them that looks a lot like what they were doing in September, more so than what they've done in the last couple weeks. Brent Johnson says 49ers D is noticeably better with Greenlaw on the field. When he's out, they struggle against teams across the middle and those committed to the run. I think every defense in the NFL, Brent, is better with Dre Greenlaw on the field. So I agree with that for sure. Loose Stitch, which legal books don't juice 6-point teasers to hell? If you find one, let me know. Mike, take a sip of coffee as we get to the next game. Saints on the road at the Minnesota Vikings. Saints 2.5-point favorites. Total in this game, 41.5. Like the Saints in this one at 2.5. Not much of an opinion on the total, which we have seen bet up from 39.5. There are 2 storylines in the NFL this week that are getting all of the play, and they're making teams look like something they are not. There are 2 storylines this week that are making NFL teams last week look, based on the scoreboard, like something they are not. And the Minnesota Vikings fall into one of them. The obvious storyline, Josh Dobbs takes over at quarterback, never took a snap from the center, didn't know the cadence, just arrived, didn't know people's names. We're getting the Hollywood storybook, right? Josh Dobbs. A quarterback that the entire league had figured out 2 weeks prior and was shipped away from Arizona as an emergency piece for Minnesota. Now, all of a sudden, getting a lot of praise. Getting comeback at a player of the year. Like, we're all over Josh Dobbs. He got away with a ton against the Atlanta Falcons in that game. That was a game that Josh Dobbs and the Vikings were trailing by 8 points late in the third quarter. And it was turnovers. It was fumbles. It was him using his legs on 3rd and long. It was him getting out of 4th downs. If I'm just saying, going into this week, it sure looks like a whole lot of a different scenario facing this New Orleans Saints defensive front, which has been solid all season long. It's sure going to look a lot different when you have Marshawn Lattimore matched up against whoever the Vikings deem to be their number 1 wide receiver. It's sure going to look a lot different for a Saints defense, which has had the time to prepare with a defensive-minded head coach in Dennis Allen, trying to figure out how he has to contain Josh Dobbs in the pocket. We are looking at the Atlanta Falcons and Arthur Smith at playing at levels of coaching and aptitude that we have not seen from a team in a very long time. And that is what the Vikings got away with last week. That was a game that the Vikings played back, are losing the vast majority of the time, that the Vikings got away with. And so we now just have a much different situation. We have Dobbs on tape. We have Dobbs in the Vikings offense reflected in what it's going to be. And you now have Dennis Allen with 5 days to come up for a game plan to stop it. I certainly think that he can, and I certainly think that he will. We also have Brian Flores for the Minnesota Vikings, who continues to blitz at historically high rates we have not seen from a defensive coordinator since before I was alive. This is going to be consistently bringing extra guys against a Derek Carr-led offense that loves the check down, that loves the screenplay, and can also run the football. It's just not a good matchup for what this defense in Minnesota is. And so I think the Saints here just a little bit short at less than a field goal. Saints are a team that I don't love laying a margin with. We talked last week and we had the Bears with the points here on the show, had that in the Nesson clip as well. But now we're getting the Saints less than a field goal against Josh Dobbs and the Vikings. This is a Vikings team that you're going to have Dobbs throwing the wide receivers 2 and 3, with running back 3 getting time, with the 3rd string tight end out there behind Hawkinson. There's so many injuries for the Vikings that they're getting away with the last couple of weeks. I think that ends this week. So liking the Saints here at less than a field goal. And here's the thing. The Saints get shredded by running quarterbacks. Josh Dobbs is not like a Lamar Jackson style running quarterback. He's scrambling around in the pocket, extending plays. Like not a lot of what Dobbs was doing a week ago against that Falcons defense was O'Connell like scheming up designed runs for him. They were scrambles that he was getting away with. This is not a Vikings team nor a Vikings offense, which hasn't scored a rushing touchdown for the first 2 months of the season. They got one 2 weeks ago. They're not just going to change into this mobile QB friendly offense and make it work. I'm just not buying into that at all whatsoever. And so that to me stands out a little bit. I think we get a good look there with the Saints. Packers on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, a cheap 3.5-point favorite across the board with the total up to 38.5 shaded over. I really want to lay the points with the Steelers, but I cannot comfortably at all lay the points with the Steelers and trust this offense to cover by margin. You now have George Pickens. I'm not going to say he's Anthony Brown 2.0, but you have the Anthony Brown theatrics. And as Coach Mike Tomlin said this week, the reality TV show around it now kind of emerging as a storyline, which I think is the last thing that Matt Canada needs to deal with. This is brutal. I think the Packers win last week was obviously aided by Brett Rippon, who's no longer on the Rams roster, but that was a Packers team that nobody wanted a part of, even in that game against the Rams. They're not sustaining offense. That is such a bad Rams defense. The Packers are not sustaining offense drive to drive. And now you're expecting Jordan Love to carry that, go on the road into Pittsburgh and make it work. I think this represents very similarly what we saw from the Titans on the short week on Thursday Night Football, but you just don't have the running game that the Titans have with the Packers, even with Aaron Jones back. And so I would love to lay the points with the Steelers. I cannot bring myself to do it at more than a field goal. And this total being bet up to me sure is quite surprising overall. And so that's an interesting overlook so far that people within the market other than myself have taken. And I can't justifiably say that I could come up with a concrete reason to why there's a lot of love within that over being taken as well. And so that's really the short and sweet stance here on that one. This is a brutal game, but yeah, it's tough. You would like to take the Steelers, but just can't trust them at all. Titans on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers 1-point favorites across the board. Total in this game, 38.5. Before we get into it, let's talk about this. Billy Cotton's going to bring that up. I'm saying that from the perspective of you have this just like elite, talented, and he now is becoming kind of this annoyance within the locker room. A lot of this is blamed on Matt Canada and his play calling and his offensive scheme. It helps nobody on that roster. The problem that the Steelers run into is with Deontay Johnson on the field. You have on one side with your wide receiver in Johnson, an amazing route runner that is required to run his routes to free up Pickens on the other side. If you look at the games where Johnson was not on the field, it was incredibly difficult for Pickens to get open. With Johnson on the field, he frees up Pickens a lot. And Tomlin talks about this a lot in his press conferences. What happens, though, is depending how defenses deploy their cornerbacks, you may find that Pickens is manned up by the best cornerback that opponent has to offer. And then you have Johnson, this elite route runner, who continues to get open. If you look at the Kenny Pickett passing chart and the way that this offense is designed, all of his targets are to the sideline. I wish I had the screenshot to pull up. The game against Tennessee was insane. There was nothing at all to the middle of the field. Everything sideline. I encourage anybody, go to Next Gen and look up the Pickett passing chart. It's madness how many of these throws go to the sideline. So if you have Pickens, bracketed or manned up against a good corner, a lot of targets are going to go to Deontay Johnson because he's going to get open with his route running ability. That's where Pickett is going to go with the football. But if you have it flipped, that's when Pickens gets open and has the potential to make big plays. And so it's not like Canada's doing nothing to help move these guys around to get them open. A good offensive coordinator would be able to utilize both of their skill sets, move them around. For the Steelers, it's just static. Nothing happens. And then on 2 of the other 3 downs, they're just running Najee Harris into the back of offensive linemen for a loss of 1 yard. So it's not all on Pickens, who is now becoming a bit of an annoyance within the locker room. You can look at this and say it's the squeaky wheel spot and you like Pickens over, but to get that Pickens over, you need a decent game from Johnson too to open him up and free him up. And the Packers really fit this because you have Jair Alexander, an elite man cover corner. Depending where he goes on the field, that's going to dictate what the Steelers offense is able to do. So to me, with the Pickens stuff, it's a much better in-play prop angle, similar to what we saw on Monday night when we figured out where Sauce was going and he was traveling with Johnson. Well, that freed up everybody else. That's exactly what you're going to see in this game, and that's going to dictate the Steelers offense. And so that's what I would say to stand out within that. But some of these outbursts on Instagram and the reels that Pickens is having is just the last thing that anybody needs. And Devin Barth called it. He's the last coach to put up with it. And we've seen that many times. Titans on the road at the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay, a 1-point favorite. This number has been static all week. Total 38.5. We have a spot where Will Levis is taking over as the Titans starting quarterback. I think that there's probably a spot where we see Tannehill healthy. This is not the week. They're probably still going to elect to go with Levis, is the way that this is trending. This is going to really be dependent on the injury situation within the Buccaneers secondary. Dean and another cornerback name slipping to mind as I'm going through this on the live stream. If someone else remembers the other cornerback for the Buccaneers who's hurt this week, they both have concussions. CJ Stroud in the first half for Houston looked much less explosive than CJ Stroud looked in the second half against Houston. The big thing that happened was Dean went down. 2 very physical corners. When you took Dean out against those wide receivers for Houston, all of a sudden, Houston guys were able to get open. That's when we really saw the Texans offense open up. For the Buccaneers, facing a Titans offense with Hopkins, very physical wide receiver. If Dean is not able to go, Hopkins is going to be able to win his battle on the other side, but that will free up whoever else the Titans are electing to throw to on the other side of the field. If you knock another corner out of the Buccaneers backfield, then Rondé Barber, who was on media yesterday saying this is the worst looking secondary in the NFL when guys are hurt, is going to be very true. And we're going to have Will Levis, who's loving to throw it deep, averaging over 11 intended air yards per throw. He's going to hit some big plays like he has the last 2 weeks. It may not be sustained offense because the Buccaneers' run defensive front is so great. So you have a Buccaneers pass funnel defense that may be down multiple starters facing a Titans offense that's enjoying throwing it deep with Will Levis. And there's a bit of a change there. And on the other side, you have a Titans run funnel defense facing Baker Mayfield and a Buccaneers offense that has been as boom or bust as any single team in offense so far through 9 weeks. So you look at this total, and you're like, okay, I got 2 pass funnel defenses playing each other. The total is less than 40. We're looking at 38.5. I like the over. That would be my stance. However, there's this underlying nuisance of we have Dave Canales and we have Tim Kelly bracketed by Mike Vrabel. What do both of these guys like to do? Run the ball on first and second down. So you have these pass funnel defenses that if both teams were smart and we had our way, would come out, they would throw the football, both sides 65% of the time, probably score a ton of points, have a lot of success. What might end up happening is both of these offensive coordinators want to be balanced in a tight game that's lined with a 1-point favorite. And they're just going to run the ball into a defensive line that's far superior to the secondary. And it's just going to kill the clock. It's going to lead to inefficient plays. And this total will be decided on what both of these quarterbacks do on third and known passing situations. And so that's the dilemma that you're dealing with here. Could very well end up being a 20-10 game that is just a miserable game that finishes incredibly quickly. This could also be something that flies into the high 40s if both of these quarterbacks are allowed to throw. So that is something that has to stand out. Brent Johnson says Zion McCollum. That's not the name. I'm going to be unprofessional here and pull out the Buccaneers depth chart to see what the exact corner whose name is completely slipping my mind is dealing with the concussion. I believe it. I believe it was Josh Hayes. There was a second guy that was added. I'm going to let it go, but that injury matters a lot within this game in the context of what these teams can do, considering the Titans have one main wide receiver and would enjoy being freed up on the other side. So that's my stance on that. It's tough to look at, tough to navigate, tough to deal with. Let's keep it going. Afternoon games now. Falcons on the road at the Cardinals. Atlanta, a 1-point favorite. Total in this game, 43.5. I like over in this one with points. We are looking at 43.5 turning into 44s. This has been bet up. Keep that in mind if you're looking at this too. You have Kyler Murray back under center for Arizona. James Conner is rumored to come back. I'm not buying that. I think next week is far more likely for Conner. He just had his window open. Darren Urban, Cards Chatter, he's a great beat reporter for the team. He's just said the window's open and maybe he comes back. To me, that would be quick if Conner comes back, and some of the injury guys are speculating that too. If Conner's back, then this over becomes a lot better. You also have Drake London, who's trending towards playing for the Falcons too. So some key offensive pieces coming back. You look at this, you're going to get an offensive bump for the Cardinals. You have a Cardinals defense that struggled stopping anybody for the duration of this season. They're facing a Falcons offense, which can get their main wide receiver back. And you're facing a Falcons defense, maybe becomes a little bit worse without Grady Jarrett in the middle of the defensive line. Perhaps the secondary becoming a little bit overrated too. That could all kind of make the Falcons rating a little bit suppressed, or a little bit increased rather, that should be suppressed a little bit further. You can see how that goes. I would look to the points in the over in this one. But again, we kind of have the underlying thing like we do with the Titans Buccaneers. When we think about Arthur Smith, it's a massive random variable for what you're going to get from a play calling perspective. On the other side, you have Kyler Murray playing with an offensive coordinator in Drew Petzing for the first time ever. Petzing came in from Cleveland. All of his preseason and early season stuff has been about wanting to run the football, wanting to get the ground game going, looking more like Cleveland than what he's done or what Arizona has been, and switching that. We haven't really seen it work, nor have we seen it come to fruition. And so I don't know fully how that's going to click early. That could be a bit of a challenge, but I do think that we see both of these teams find a way to move the football on each other. And I do think this total is going to continue to be pushed up to 44 or higher. So I think there's still some little bit of value there within the over. Lions on the road at the Chargers. Total in this game is 48.5. The Lions, unfortunately, now out to a 3-point favorite. I did like the Lions. I wouldn't play them at 3 in this spot as well. I think that's getting that's probably to the fair point. This was at 2 earlier this morning. So there has been some Lions money that has come in and pushed this up. The big thing you need to know about the Lions is they're getting Jonah back at left guard. They're getting Frank Ragnow back at center. 2 key pieces on the offensive line out of the bye. They are both good to go. It also looks like David Montgomery is going to turn back into the starter within the backfield. So you have now the Lions with Ben Johnson as the play caller, who wanted to come into this season, work behind their offensive line, utilize the run game, free things up for Jared Goff in the pass game. The really good Lions performances that we have seen this year were with the combination of these guys healthy and the Lions being able to do what they wanted. Obviously, we had the Gibbs breakout game. If we think back to like week 1 against the Chiefs, where that O-line dominated, where they got the run game going, Gibbs was not the big factor people wanted him to be. And that was the big complaint for like the duration of September. Where's Gibbs? Why is Gibbs not being used? He's being used in interesting ways. They're all the memes, right? Well, now Gibbs has sort of solidified himself like, here's how he works within the offense. David Montgomery did that in the first half of the season. Now you have both of them. And it's sort of been worked out what both of their roles are and how they fit. And you have the offensive line back intact too. So I think this Lions offense is going to look really good. And it comes at a good time against the Chargers pass rush, which has got healthy and looked really well as too. And so you think about where Jared Goff struggles. It's on the road. It's under pressure. It's laying points. But now the Lions can negate a lot of that too with their offensive line healthy, with the run game. So I think the Lions look really good. Defensively for the Lions, I think that this unit as a whole is overrated, but they get a pass here. I get that it's Justin Herbert, but this is a Chargers team that is void of weapons. The Jets defense is terrific. I get it. But if you take Mike Williams out of the equation, which they have, he's on IR, and now you have Josh Palmer out of the equation, there's just not a lot there past Keenan Allen. There's not a lot to get excited about. There's not a lot that defenses need to do differently to defend these guys. It's an offense that's kind of propped up by its reputation. They failed to break 200 yards against the Jets, and Austin Eckler can get all the targets he wants in the world. It's not that hard for a defense to scheme out a running back catching passes out of the backfield, as we saw the Jets do. And that was a Jets team that is a league worst at defending running back passes out of the backfield. They shut them out. And so I think the Lions, with extra week to prepare, Glenn is going to get this right. And where Glenn has struggled as a defensive coordinator, that big weakness has been against mobile quarterbacks. So from a prop perspective, you may be intrigued by some of these Herbert rushing totals, which have been at like 8.5, 9.5. That's probably going to be low, but I think the Lions can scheme up a game plan to defend the Chargers offense pretty well. So it's unfortunate this moved to 3. Wanted to have it as a side here on the show, but don't know if I'm running it at 3 as it stands now, but certainly like the look of the Lions within this spot. And it's going to be essentially a 50-50 split crowd-wise for this one as well. Giants on the road. I can't say this with a straight face. Giants on the road at the Cowboys, catching 16 points with Tommy DeVito as the starting quarterback. Hold on. Guyton is not comparable to Josh Palmer. I'm disagreeing with you there, Ari. I appreciate the comment, but that is a big difference between the two. You also have Guyton on special team duties as well. That is not a direct replacement. That is a 4 replacing a 2.5 in terms of the depth chart. It's a big drop off for sure. How many points do you need to take the Giants? The market said 17 was enough. I don't think that it is. This is a game that the Cowboys have shown a couple times this season against a bad quarterback. They get the early score. The defense gets going. Brian Daboll looks absolutely miserable on the sideline trying to come up with anything for Tommy DeVito. And so this is so bad for the Giants. They're 32nd now in the market ratings. We had the joke earlier that they were too high at 32. This is a disaster and just seems like a game that the Cowboys can, again, we've seen it a couple times this year where they've just absolutely run up numbers on opponents. Connor says divisional games are different. I don't think this is going to be different from what the Cowboys did earlier in the season. I just don't know if I want to lay 16 points with the Cowboys in this spot against the Giants. But I think this is the beginning of the end for the Giants. I think we're seeing now Daboll and Kafka, after they earned security last year, they get through this season. It's probably somehow a move on from Daniel Jones, and they're just going to try to get through with DeVito in this spot. This is a mess for the Giants. You try to make a case for it. I got nothing strong for the Giants. Like they got rid of Williams, their best run stopping defender. I get that Pollard hasn't been explosive. He may not need to be in this game. So maybe you can make the case that the Cowboys, as like front runners with the big lead with Pollard lacking explosiveness, the Giants can contain that and keep it within the number. But I just haven't seen anything in 2 weeks. That Raiders defense is as soft as any defense in the league in terms of coverage they play. DeVito was getting nothing for the Giants at all. And so this to me is not like that Bills game where you had Tyrod come in who was willing to throw it deep, who was trying to this is to me just such a different scenario and one I think the Cowboys can potentially really run up a big number. But yeah, this is a monster number for the Cowboys overall. 3 games left. Commanders on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. Before we get into this one, I would be remiss if I don't remind everybody, college basketball, it is going every single day. The starter service, we'll pick 3 comments from the live chat. We'll give the 6-game comp to you guys, and we'll do 3 comments down below. Leave your best comment after the video ends. We'll pick 3 to get the comp for the 6 plays on the starter service too. raspicks.com/order for full details on that college basketball subscription. I said there would be a leg number 2 to go with the Ravens on the money line. A couple people guessed it. You guessed right. It would be the Seattle Seahawks money line in this spot, hosting the Washington Commanders. Seahawks are a 6-point favorite, minus 115. Total in this game, 45.5. Seahawks are off back-to-back games. They played the Browns defense and the Ravens defense. Browns defense, we know, market rated number 1 in the NFL. Not a lot of people disagreeing with that. Brutal spot for the Seahawks. They managed to get through it. Last week, another impossible task. You have to face that Ravens defense, which I think DVOA has them, again, historically good. Just 2 of the worst defensive opponents a team could play. They also had kind of the kryptonite for Geno Smith, which has been when he faces man coverage, his numbers fall off of a cliff. And that was 2 terrific man coverage units facing Geno Smith in back-to-back weeks. So this Seahawks team that was trending up was like a fringe 7-8 rated team in the league, 2 brutal games. Now they get the reset against the Commanders defense that here's kind of the rub within this, right? They were basically telling you, if we go back 9 days, that they were selling everybody off. They got rid of their 2 best pass rushers in the front 7. It's a secondary that hasn't been able to stop anybody. They get the win against Mac Jones, but again, we just talked about the Patriots offense and how much it's been struggling. Now this unit, without those pieces, is going across the country to play Seattle, an offense that has just played 2 brutal defensive opponents. We're going to see things level out here. I think the Seahawks look much better than what we have seen them in the last 2 weeks. I think the Seahawks have a big game like so many other quarterbacks have done against this Commanders defense, and they hang a big number on the board. And so, to me, Seattle, a clear play on in this spot. Would put that money line with the Ravens as well. Put those 2 together, and you're getting a price right around even money or better. So I like Seattle in this spot. 2 more games to go. The Jets on the road at the Raiders. Jets a 1-point favorite at Pinnacle, 1.5 at Chris at Circa. Total in this game, 36. We talked about the Minnesota Vikings. I said there were 2 storylines this week. They were getting a lot of play, making teams look better than they are. And there were 2 results last week with teams that got results that made them look better than they are. The Raiders are team number 2. The Raiders last week had the full reset. You get the GM, head coach, OC, quarterback, all gone. Get them out of there. It's a historic spot where teams play up, right? To make that even more effective within that spot, you have the Giants and Daniel Jones tears ACL late in the first quarter, brings in DeVito. All of a sudden, the Ravens defense can absolutely feast, and they sure did. And so not only did you have this massive spot, but you also had the situation where you get the backup quarterback, and then it's just a free-for-all. What was maybe missed within that is the Raiders had the lead very comfortably, and Josh Jacobs is running into the back of offensive linemen for gains of 2 and 3. He finished with under 100 yards, had almost 25 carries, right? There just wasn't a lot of sustained offense for the Raiders. It was benefiting from mistakes. It was benefiting from the Giants' errors. And that just made the Raiders look really, really good. To me now, you're getting the storyline. You're getting Antonio Pierce, and he's got the backup players on the sideline, and everything's great. They're smoking cigars. They got 2 days off. Everyone wants to talk about the Raiders. The reset happened last week. Excitement's high. Devontae Adams at college basketball games talking about how different it is, right? I get it. It's amazing. It's the Raiders' turnaround. At the same time now, you get this Jets defense that has held opponents to less than 200 yards the last 2 weeks. They've held opponents to less than 3.5 yards per play. And they now have, you're looking at this, and it's a rookie quarterback with a running game that's been non-existent. You have Antonio Pierce, who, if he was not kind of surrounded by this playing up of how great it was and how different it was, we would be looking at some of the things that Antonio Pierce has said in the last 9 days and criticizing it and finding ways to say, this is the Raiders team that I want to fade, because Pierce is talking like a head coach from 1985, right? But because it's this reset and there's this direct contrast to McDaniels, it's being viewed as a positive thing. We have a Raiders play caller who's never called plays before that is talking about how the heartbeat of this team is running the football. Good luck running the football against the Jets defense. That's not going to work, right? And so if this was removed and it was a start of season situation for the Raiders, we would be laughing at this coaching staff saying like, this is ridiculous. How can I bet against them? But because it's put in this spot and we have the contrast and sort of this hype around it, I feel it's being treated very, very differently. We're now seeing the Jets team off of that Monday night game where by all metrics within the box score and all this performance, as bad as Zach Wilson is, as bad as the offensive line is, should have won that game. They lose by 21. And so, like, where is this sort of fitting out? I know it's painful to try bet on Zach Wilson. I get that that's a stretch, but I can't help but think that the Jets are the side here in this spot, and you're getting terrific defense matched up against a play caller and an offense for the Raiders that is going to find themselves in a tough spot all the way around as well. So I think there's some value here with the Jets laying just the point in this game. Monday Night Football to wrap up the live stream here for week number 10. It is the Broncos on the road at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are going to be in every single teaser around the world. 7.5-point favorites, minus 115. A lot of these games have been going to 9. They do every season, but I think there's extra emphasis this year around some of these teaser legs, especially at like 1.5 and 2. We've just seen a lot of movement late week, so keep that in mind if you're looking at this. Total in this game is 47. My initial thoughts on this when I saw it was Broncos off the bye, catching more than the touchdown is a pretty good look. Josh Allen, believe it or not, the only quarterback that has been worse the last month at passes 15 yards downfield or more is Mr. Zach Wilson. That's how bad Josh Allen has been at throwing the football deep over the last month since the rumors around the injury to the AC joint in his shoulder have emerged. If you think about last year, very similar situation when he had the elbow injury, his deep passing fell off of a cliff. And we're seeing that again here with what is speculated to be another throwing arm injury. And so, again, I think this Broncos defense is kind of underrated now as it's continuing to improve. Let's see what that looks like. I think the Bills are just going to be a super popular side on Monday night. We might get a little bit better with the Broncos, but I think that the Broncos defense shows a little bit better. And I think we see a Broncos offense that's quietly been relatively efficient, be able to move the football against the Bills defense that is still without a lot of weapons. I don't think Linval Joseph coming in is going to fix things immediately up front. I still think even with Rasul Douglas, we're going to see this defense continue to struggle a little bit. Cincinnati at times looked really comfortable moving the football. I think the Broncos are going to be able to do it as well. So I kind of like the Broncos here at home, catching more than the touchdown at 7.5. Zahari says, best NFL show. Greetings from Copenhagen. Greetings as well. Copenhagen, one of my favorite videos on all of YouTube is called The $2 Cruise Ship by Simon Wilson. And ever since I saw that about 4 years ago, Copenhagen has been up there on the list of places that I want to visit. That's a brilliant video. And it went around Denmark as well. It's just hilarious to watch. Would love to visit Copenhagen one day. Would love to visit that whole region. It's on the list for sure as well. We had a couple different comments to get to. Survivor pick between Indy, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. Holy smokes. Robert, is that all you have left? Not Pittsburgh. Definitely not Indy. I think that's tough. I think you got to go Chicago. You're also going to get the value of not many people take Thursday teams in the Survivor. Don't put your Survivor pool on me forcing a decision late in the stream with 5 minutes to go. Don't do that. You've got to this point doing yourself. Don't put me in that spot. But of those three, I would say Chicago. Robert brings up a good point about Billy Turner. He is out this week. It is addition by subtraction. If you have Billy Turnstile away from the right tackle, who allowed 9 individual pressures himself on Monday Night Football, that is going to be a boost for sure. Matthew Roseburn says, do you think it's a good teaser week? Well, every week so far this season has seemingly been a decent teaser week. My favorite teaser put on the spot to pick one right now as we end the show is probably a pass. I would go Ravens Seahawks moneyline parlay before I would place any teaser this week all the way around. That's the way that I would go with that and get that right around even money all the way. All right. This is the longest show ever by 2.5 minutes. We've gone to 1 hour, 10 minutes. I took one sip of coffee, Mike. That's what happens when you get going downhill. I've got Nesson coming up in 5 minutes and then ESPN in 25 minutes. So I got to keep the voice going. But hopefully this was a good show. Hopefully everybody got some picks and some bets. Garrett, before we go, best futures bet. Jets to make the playoffs plus 250. That's not a joke. I would take that just because if they can figure out the offense just a little bit. Fun fact, if the Jets had scored 22 points or more in the last 25 games, they would be 21-4. That puts in perspective how great this defense has been for a season and a half. They don't have to become a great offense. They need to find a way to score 20 points a game. If they can do that with the mess in the AFC playoffs, like the Steelers are in the playoffs, the Chargers, who I think have as bad of offensive issues as the Jets might have, right? They're all up there in playoff spots and right on the fringe. There's going to be a mess in the AFC between like teams 6 and 10 for the next month and a half. And I think if the Jets can find a way to get that offense going just a little bit, that could be there. And so that's a bigger price. Don't like the award stuff. Not a lot stands out from the MVP stuff as well either. So that's the way that I would go too. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Murray. Thank you, Paul Enzo. Thank you, Devin Barth. Thank you, Murray, for saying that. We'll pull that up in a little bit as well. Thank you to everybody else who is standing in there as well and joining us here on the show. If you're watching this after, best comment down below in the video. I will pick 3. You will get a comp to the service for 6 plays for college basketball. Devin Barth, where can we listen to ESPN? ESPN Radio today is in Memphis, Tennessee at 11 o'clock, 33 minutes. And then I go live with Sam and Nesson in 3 minutes as well. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Have a fantastic week 10. Enjoy the games. And we'll see you back here next Wednesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific.